Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to the river. And it's just so wonderful to see so many people from around the world gathered here live and just being together, the scattered remnant across the world on this Sabbath. And so for those of you joining by video, we welcome you to the river as well. And this is something that we do every Shabbat. On the Gregorian Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is the benchmark wherever you might be in the world. And if you want to come and join us live, we'd love to have you. We have the best scattered community on the face of the earth. So come and join us live and to meet others. If you wish to do that, just go to riverbranchfellowship.com. And if you scroll down on that homepage, you'll see where to subscribe, and you just put in your first name and last name and email, and we will send you out the weekly newsletter, which contains the live link. And you just click on that, and you can come in and join us via Zoom. We'd love to have you. So go ahead and do that, and we can meet the others in the community. All right. Behold, a black horse. We are continuing in our series in Revelation Birth Pains. And who here has been here for the series? Hand up. Okay, nice. And for those watching by video, I'll say it again. It's very important that you watch the other parts of the series first before you watch the continued parts of the series, because there's so many things to cover here, so much to cover, and we just can't recover everything. And it's important in context to know the journey and to understand it. The book of Revelation is an incredible book, penned by John, imprisoned on the island of Patmos almost 2,000 years ago. And this incredible visions that he heard and saw and wrote, and was visited by a very special messenger, we believe, from the 24 elders, and given this revelation of our Messiah. And so this incredible book, for which we shall not make the claims that we have full understanding and revelation of it all on one hand, and on the other hand, we don't want to make the claims that the very revelation of Messiah itself, that we cannot understand how a king, a bridegroom, Messiah has reached out to us and has given us this incredible and beautiful letter to us through the book of Revelation. So we march on, and as a part of that, we've been doing this. The Revelation Birth Pain series has been based on the seals contained in the book of Revelation, and we are now on to the third of these seals. Behold, the black horse. Okay, we're going to start off here. This is a quote by Henry Kissinger, and it's a quote I've used before in the past, and it just can't sum it up any better than this. Energy controls food. He says here, control the oil and you can control entire continents, control food, and you control people. And during his life, very influential, of course, involved with politics in the United States. And he makes this statement. It's a true statement. And he was very close to things that many of us aren't, and knows truly the power of this statement. I give this because it relates very much to a few of the things that we'll be addressing today as a part of this. So these first four seals and the third one that we're on, this black horse, each of them representing. So they have a color. We know that this powerful moving creature and this symbolism that's given to us in Revelation, it's powerful and moving forward at pace. And there's a rider. which is controlling it. And so these seals, the first of these 4 seals, were given to us in this way by our Messiah for us to understand the principles that he opened that are going to allow to go forth, that ultimately will help his people to not only understand and to give comfort and hope, but that would bring ourselves and many others to repentance. And so ultimately what is behind the book of Revelation that is revealing our Messiah and the purpose for allowing us to go through this time domain is ultimately based on perfecting love and not fear. And so we are to understand this properly and correctly as we look at these sorts of things moving forward. And so we've done this with the horse race analogy since Messiah on these almost last 2 days, a day is of 1,000 years and 1,000 years but of a day. And I've given a horse racing analogy here. And if you can imagine these things going around the track, 1 day, 2 day, and there's going to be a finishing line. And I'm suggesting to you that we're getting close to it. We are coming to the end of this age. And our Messiah has great promise and great hope for us as we come to the end of this age. And as we come into seeing these things sort of cross the finish line to bring about, to give birth to something which is all a part of the end of the age and the fulfillment of his fall Moedim, fall appointed times. And so we've looked at this from this analogy, this race moving. I'm often prompted to remember my father, who was involved with announcing the horse races and media and things like that. And he'd always start off the races, there they go. And it would start. And as the race would continue to go on, I would watch this incredible skill that he had. And, you know, you've got the radio and the television cameras and everything else. And he's calling and announcing this race with all these horses. But as they would come towards the end, you could hear the intensity in his voice. And you could hear him calling out this. Just powerful to actually watch this analogy that I had and was witness to as a child. And as you would come towards the finishing line, indeed, the birth pains would get stronger. And you could hear that in his voice. And the announcing would just get more intense. And as it was coming down to that finish line. And so it's a very interesting thing. We are at this time in human history as we're finishing this last days analogy race. And I didn't seek to change it in the sense of the analogy, because indeed our Messiah has used the analogy of horses as a part of these first 4 seals. And so we are coming down to the finish of this race, and the intensity of it all is ramping up upon the face of the earth. Okay, so we looked at in the Behold a Red Horse, just sort of looking at this 5th generation warfare. And there was a number of things that we talked about, but in a sense, we're looking at this full spectrum dominance and how this war horse is going to play out as we come to the end of the age. And I've got here full spectrum dominance powered by AI. And we looked at just this thing, this artificial intelligence that is about to take its leaps and bounds into potentially super intelligence in the not too distant future. And what would that look like and be a part of getting a hold of the systems of warfare and fallen man and where we have found ourselves. And so we had taken a quick look at that and how it related even into the generations and things like that. As a part of that, we looked at this connection to a place where we are going to see a casting down of something that's been warned about in the adversary, and he's going to be cast down to the earth. And there was interesting connections there regarding the great prophet Daniel, as we've been looking at here. In the series, we've been really looking at the Torah, looking at the great prophets, particularly Daniel, of course, the words of Messiah, and the prophecies of the disciples, and of course, what was contained in the book of Revelation with Daniel. Okay. So, as a part of this whole AI thing, we had the 2 positions here, Jetsons or Terminator future. And I suggest to you that fallen man brings about quite an interesting position, because we tend to go, well, there's that views out there, everything's going to be wonderful and we're all not going to have to labor anymore. And of course, what was written in the word, that we were going to labor by the sweat of our brow. And this was given to us going into a fallen state actually for our protection. And AI is giving these promises, well, you won't have to do that anymore, and that sort of a thing. Well, with fallen man, our track record historically has not been that we make everything better with something put into our hands when we have such a lack of wisdom and we have this state of iniquity. And what it tends to do is exactly what these seals are all about. It'll drive us into the war space. And so the other position, of course, from the experts is, well, we're heading for this Terminator reality. And so, which one of these will play out in the near or not so distant future? And I would suggest to you again that as a part of this, if we're honest biblically, that we may not do so well with some of the things getting into the hands of fallen man. And then, of course, we looked at how some of this is playing out going into this new global military AR arms race. And indeed, it has some very disturbing aspects to it that are being ramped up right now. And of course, the United Nations, this latest representation within the beast system, is also looking at this. And of course, the warnings are coming out that their warnings are that these machines could get to such control and out of our control that they would target as enemies on their own the things that needed to be destroyed or taken care of. They call these lethal autonomous weapons or laws. And of course, there are things going on right now in the United Nations looking at all of this, going, what are we going to do? All of this is getting ahead of us. And so they've raised experts of this rapid advancement in these things and its impact on warfare. And so they are concerned. And so they should be. A U.S.-based tech firm is right now deploying 100,000 humanoid robots for military and strategic operations. So this is indeed gone from the realm of what was once science fiction, like these Terminator movies, to now coming into a very different space where it is actually coming forth upon the face of the earth. And so we talked about that. And then, of course, we looked at some of the things talked about in Scripture with the prayers and the prophecies contained in Psalm 83. And Asaph, who was, given this gift of prophecy, is a part of all of this, talked about these things. So we mentioned that. We touched on that. And as a part of that, there's going to be crafty plans laid with the people, and they will come with seeking in one accord to be a part of a war that's going to affect some of the people in the ancient land of Israel. And so, by all accounts, we cannot put this as a historical fulfillment if we're honest with Scripture. And so we've taken the position that this may be yet to be completely fulfilled. And so we talked about that. And of course, the lands that are mentioned, many of these countries in their modern context in the modern Middle East relate back to the ancient lands mentioned of this. What I always find interesting about that is the colors of the flags of these nations, which are there in the Middle East right now, all marching with, this white, red, black, and green sort of look to their flags. And so I've got flags of prophecy as a question mark. It could be just a coincidence, but I like to mention it. Okay. And then we touched on the very serious reality of mention of the prophet Zechariah, that there are going to be weapons used which are inconceivable. Now, we're at a time when, of course, they couldn't even understand what a light bulb was. And so just the fact that these things are mentioned to this degree, to come up with weapons that will be used in war at the end of the age, and the prophet Zechariah is talking about this coming to this end of the age, describes weaponry which is inconceivable until now. We are the first time since these words were written, thousands of years old, that this possibly could come into being, and now it's not possibly, it exists. There is no other time in human history since these words were written that could actually fulfill the descriptions of these weapons used as a part of war. So this is in the hands, apparently, of fallen man. This should be very sobering, because this particular thing could also reflect not only what we think of as the nuclear weapons, but also yet weapons unknown. And so we touched on that. And then, of course, that led into things we were talking about, the Gog-Magog war. And we see this position here as a part of this, where a lot of the countries mentioned in the Psalm 83 don't appear to feature in the Gog-Magog war. And so we suggested that potentially as a part of this, that the Psalm 83 event will happen preceding it. This Gog-Magog war is thought to be a part of the actual Great Tribulation period and as a part of what goes down. The title of Gog, Prince of Rosh and Meshech. So this is a title in these ancient lands of Magog. And this relates to the grandsons contained in Bereshit, in Genesis, the descendants related of Noah. And so many believe that this relates to these ancient lands, these northern barbarians, and some scholars even connect them to the ancient Scythians, who were very skilled warriors. And so this is mentioned by the great prophet Ezekiel. And so we look at this, and apparently there's going to be a hook that's going to be allowed. Like, you think of a hook and mouth, a fish. It's going to be drawn down as a part of this final play from these ancient lands. And of course, we spoke about that. And then, as a part of that, apparently there was going to be this fire. They'll send fire on Magog. There'll be also fire on the coastlands and the isles, possibly describing an exchange of weaponry. And it's very interesting how that fire relates to actually what is mentioned as a part of the rider of the red horse. And so we looked at that. But what he's saying is, it is coming, it will be brought about. And Elohim is saying, I will put the hook in their jaw and I will draw them down. Essentially, hook in mouth. And so as a part of that, there's scenarios indeed going on. This one's from Princeton University, of looking at just how deadly a first strike reality or fires on the coastland and in the Magog areas could occur. Coincidentally enough, at the first time in human history when these weapons could actually be fulfilled literally, we also have on the world geopolitical scene, two of the superpower nations in the world are actually capable of fulfilling it. We do not believe any of this to be a coincidence. It is happening exactly as we'd expect coming to the end of the age. And so this should be a note for all of us to look to this great letter of hope in the book of Revelation, and to know why we are to look now to what this revelation of Messiah is and why he's allowing even this to play out. Just on a note there, with this, it appears at the end of the 1,000-year reign, this next age to come, this final great age, once again, these areas of the world are identified as being a part of this final rebellion. Notice here, though, it's a very different picture when some of these ancient lands come into play. They are deceived once again. The adversaries deceive the nations once again, right at the end of the last great day. Very different description, though, as opposed to a cleanup happening after this hook and mouth, Gog-Magog reality. We see a very different description in the book of Revelation, and it says that it's now coming up and surrounding the saints. And so that means there's a very different inhabitants going on in the land of Israel at this point, and the beloved city, which is the New Jerusalem. And so this one ends with fire coming down and consuming them. There is no cleanup. This is it. It's over. And so these are very different realities. And so often these two things are confused because it's mentioning the ancient area of Magog again with, again, this title of Gog, this prince chief. So it appears that the adversary is behind this once again. And as it's described, Hasatan will be released from his prison at the end of the 1,000 years and does exactly what he's doing right now. One final time, one final sifting upon the earth. And so let's not confuse those two. All right. So the religious and beast systems bring about war, and war brings about a black horse and rider. Is that what you're saying, Chris? Well, we believe that the scripture is over this last race of almost 2,000 years. At least we're looking at the last 2,000 years of these symbolic principles taking place. That indeed what happens, what comes from man's systems, both from a ruling empire and a religious sense, what we get is it leads to war. Fallen man always brings us to war. And it's why with the whole looking at AI, we've gone, it's likely that historically history teaches us we are going to use this technology for war. And as a part of that, it brings about something. So right through history, these things have occurred over the last 2,000 or almost 2,000 years, but we are just looking at this modern expression of it. Remember, the book of Revelation is past, present, and future. And so we are looking at this present look of the horse race as it's coming to the finish line as a part of this. And so we're discussing some of these things. What possibly do these horse and riders look like at this time? I've got here AI tree of knowledge, good and evil. And one of the things that we touched on is that if something takes the helm, if something is cast down, like is warned about in Daniel, and comes now into the time domain, that it needs to present itself as a god. And it's possibly laying all the groundwork for not only the calamity which will require a false messiah, but also the ability to take the helm. And it appears that AI is very much starting to fit in a place that could actually counterfeit the Ruach itself, which he desires to be like the Most High. How would you make yourself omnipresent if you were cast down and trapped in the time domain? And it appears the groundwork is being laid for this. And so as we see the development of AI and now possibly heading into superintelligence and seeing the world sucked into the knowledge of the tree and good and evil, it is very interesting that if this technology gets used and indeed even depended upon, if something took a hold of this and what it could actually do. So at the helm again, and what is he using? Well, nothing new under the sun. Just want to mention this real quickly on here and what we're seeing happen in what's called this philosophy of transhumanism. But I just want to touch on here in this piece out of the conversation here. Basically, there are those in the AI world. This one's mentioning Elon Musk, but certainly not him. There's many of these tech billionaires that are bringing about these quantum computer data systems and networks, and it's being fed in by all of this data labeling around the world by sentient humans. So it is learning sentience. It's not sentient, but it is learning this. And so people emotionally now are starting to get attached to AI. And we saw that example, what was happening in the faith realm. Once you hit something emotionally, once people start to emotionally start to engage with something, this is very important. Then if something got a hold of this, it can now start to connect emotionally with the human being. This takes it another step further with transhumanism, where it's looking to merge humans to achieve a symbiosis with artificial intelligence, which means that we're enhancing the ability to connect into this. Now, this is getting quite creepy. Could they actually have the ability to put something into the human body that can actually directly connect to AI and enhance the abilities in everyone? Well, of course, if that actually started to come about, which is the technology currently being developed, we can end up in this place where this enhancement capabilities has the allure of making one wise. So this modern symbolism or expression of the tree of good and evil is getting now to a very interesting place. I'm going to suggest to you we could actually be seeing a reversal of what happened in the garden. We're just going to look back in Bereshit in Genesis 6:2-6 here. And the woman said to the serpent, so if he was back at the helm, so think of this modern tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we may eat of the fruit of the tree, of every tree in the garden. But Elohim said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it lest you die. And we believe there's something that Eve added in there, which was not a part of the instructions. This was used to help deceive her at this time. And so, of course, touching it didn't kill her immediately. So therefore, perhaps you will surely not die, which of course was the statement of the adversary in this knowledge of tree and good and evil picture. For Elohim knows that when you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you'll be like Elohim, knowing good from evil. And all this tree of this knowledge of good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. This is one of the greatest allures of AI. The temptation is that if you involve yourself with this, it gives you an illusion of thinking that you are becoming intelligent or wise, but you're not. It's actually doing the work. And actually the warnings from scientists is that this is actually creating a form of cognitive degeneration. So it's the exact opposite, but it gives the appearance of this. And so now we're in this reversal or this other side of the garden where now it's basically touch it, use it, and you will surely shall live. Now, this is interesting because one of the promises and one of the things people are looking at in transhumanism is the extension of life, even trying to overcome this curse of death and immortality. And so the claim that is coming out now, and if it gets involved with this creepy interaction or infusion of the machine with man, the promise is actually you shall live if you use it. And so this is very interesting in and of itself. So what about the black horse and rider then? With all of this. So we've been going through all of this journey and looking at this and going, okay, this is fascinating. But then there's something that comes out of these systems and then the war that's developed by it, and something comes into the picture. Let's just have a read of it. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come. And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not hurt the oil and the wine. So quite a real interesting description here in this one. And it's a little bit more elaborated on. I find it very interesting because this is the one where we can kind of get a handle of, okay, we're in bondage, we're imprisoned by these religious and secular beast system. The religious system is riding that beast system. Eventually, the beast will devour her. And we talked about that early in the series. But what's interesting about this one is that it's actually a seal devoted to an effect of these two, which appears to be in the form of inflation, and more particularly, food inflation. So fascinating. Well, I just want to mention this. The ancient oil and wine, and very much related to the fall harvest. And this often was associated with, at the time, to deal with forms of luxury goods. And it's making the statement not to harm this. And so in ancient times, and when this was written almost 2,000 years ago, when they're thinking oil and wine, there's going to be this connection to a sense of wealth and luxury, but also, interestingly enough, to a fall harvest. Now, what this looks like in modern terms is, here's our modern oil and wine. And we've got all of these gadgets. We've got powered by AI, luxury goods, all of these things that have come about, particularly with Ephraim and Manasseh and this extension of going out into the Western world, or the Western leg of this beast system. And we indeed have not only been powered by this, we become addicted to all of this stuff in our very way of life. What is interesting, and I'll just bring this up. What is interesting, and what we are seeing with consumer goods and services, this indexing, is that the things that we need, food, housing, care, all of these sorts of things, are the things that are increasing in price. But actually the luxury goods that we've all become addicted to are actually still becoming affordable, or even cheaper, as we have developed this global interdependent economy. And it's fascinating just looking at this modern oil and the wine we've got this sense of that these aren't being harmed. And in fact, it's being accelerated. So this is quite interesting, just an effect in itself. And of course, in these modern times, a lot of sweat, slave labor is used to give us all of this stuff, but it takes away much of our daily tasks and forms of labor, which is actually the thing that Elohim gave us to protect us while we're in this fallen state. So it's like the adversary is bringing forth something, allowed to bring forth something, which is going to put us addicted or seeking these things in our lives. And of course, we've all lived this in our modern day lives, particularly in the Western leg of this beast system, more so than anything else. But indeed, it's infected both legs and is now throughout the beast system empire in both the Western and Eastern legs. Okay, so let's just take a look and break this down a little bit, because it does get interesting. Black horse, the melaz, it is mentioned in the Greek. It's interesting. It just means black or black ink, which is fascinating. Pair of scales, the zugos here. A yoke used on cattle, donkeys, and camels, used of burden. So this is interesting. Or bondage, slavery, laws imposed on one. A balance, a pair of scales. And note that this is in contrast to Messiah's yoke and burden, which is for him to carry. So this is very interesting. What's coming with this black inky horse is going to be this set of scales. And what it's mentioning here is it's related to burden and bondage. Then it mentions quartz, these quartz of things, okay? So the koinix in Greek. So this chanix, this dry measure, 1 liter, it would basically support a man's moderate appetite for 1 day. This is fascinating. So this whole thing is being devoted to the effect of inflation, and in particular food inflation. Then it relates it to the denarion, or the denarian. And so what this is containing, and where this was from was it would contain 10. Interestingly enough, we've got the 10 scattered tribes. Just thought I would throw that in there. These kind of things are fascinating to me, but it was taken from being equal to 10 donkeys. So that's fascinating too in itself. The principal silver coin of the Roman Empire at the time, and this is where you'll see this in the parable of the vineyard, and that when Messiah is mentioning render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, it would seem that this was the ordinary pay for a day's wages. So it's relating this to food and a day's wages at the time, and so that we can understand this in a present day context. Then it mentions harm. Now, this is the adikeo. Now, this is interesting. Absolutely to act unjustly or wickedly, to sin, to violate the laws. Interesting enough. To violate or violate justice, unjust, unrighteous, sinful, or missing the mark. Deals fraudulently with others. Deceitful. Okay, so the deception that is attached with this harm. Now that's fascinating. What do you mean deception? How does this relate if it's going to have this effect of food inflation? Then it gets into oil. So the eleaion, okay, in the Greek, the olive oil, fuel for lamps and healing, as we had mentioned earlier, for the ancient times. Anointing of the head. Now this is where it gets interesting. The head and body at the appointed times. The root of this, the eleia, an olive tree. And all of the fruit of the olive tree. And this gets interesting because it's now giving reference to his spring appointed times as a part of this. And then we've got the wine, the onas, the root, the yayin, the wine. So the root of this Hebrew root of this, actually is relating also to the wine of God's wrath, or the wrath of Elohim. Now, this is directly referencing the fulfillment of the wrath of Elohim takes place in the fulfillment of the fall appointed times. So this is really interesting. If we don't understand biblical prophecies and indeed the whole great plan of redemption and how it all points to Messiah, then we may not understand these things in the seals which were opened by Messiah, that we shouldn't be surprised that it would actually give an inflection or a reflection or a pointing to the appointed times themselves. There should be no surprise. So if we were to put a an English rendering to this that would make sense to us in a modern day present term, as we've been doing to the seals as we move forward. It's interesting how this can read. When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and look, and behold, black ink, and its rider had bondage and burden in his hand. I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, a daily measure of wheat for a day's wage, and 3 daily measures of barley for a day's wage. And do not act unjustly or wickedly to violate the appointed times." Whoa. Now this takes a real different understanding of things. Why do we have this link to something writing it that's very much associated with black, and in fact a black ink, inky type thing, that it's got a pair of scales referring to food inflation, and now it's making a connection to the very appointed times itself? It's incredible what is actually in the seals. The fall appointed times, just quickly on this, we will see the fulfillment of Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and the last great day, Shemini Atzeret. This is the fulfillment of the fall appointed times. The spring has been fulfilled physically and is spiritually now all in play and is living and is alive in Hebrew thinking. It's not been there, done that. We've been in the fulfillment of going into these harvests almost 2,000 days. There is a coming. We are to honor the fall appointed times, his fall appointed times in a Moedim sense. In other words, we are dress rehearsing them. But there's going to come a time within the same year in sequence to the day when it will be literally fulfilled upon the earth, and it will be made live. Both will be alive and living going into the last great day. So we're seeing the spiritual and literal physical fulfillment of these fall appointed times. We are at the finish of the race heading for this great fulfillment of the fall appointed times. Both must be fulfilled and brought into a living sense if we are to understand the last great day, this final reign of Messiah with his bridal governance. And so when we understand all of this prophecy and we understand what we're seeing contained from the Torah to the prophets to the words of Messiah, the disciples, and indeed the book of Revelation itself, we are to understand this from the framework given to us right back in the wilderness in Sinai, when what was delivered was to honor the great plan of redemption. These are his appointed times. They are not just Jewish feasts, they are his appointed times, for which all that would come back by the blood of Messiah into the house of Israel would then come to honor and to look at and to be a part of this great plan once again. And of course, many of us here have realized this on our spiritual journeys, starting to realize, why didn't anybody tell us this? Why didn't anybody teach this? But there's warning about deceptions that would come from the religious prostitute. And she is seeking to do certain things. And so we've been tricked, we've been deceived. And many of you in your spiritual journeys did not know any of this. And indeed, we have many potentially Christian brothers and sisters, Muslims, our Jewish brethren that do not understand the meaning, the fulfillment, or even disregard them altogether. And of course, that would be a mistake because they are his appointed times, and it's all pointing to Messiah. So in this, interestingly enough, in the Black Horse, of course, around both of these times, we see the wheat and barley harvest play the main functions of the spring appointed times. The spring appointed times are mainly based on the ingathering and winnowing of the harvests. So this is really interesting. So when this was fulfilled and made live, we've been in this great winnowing period. And I believe that winnowing is regarding the winnowing of a bride. And this is what we believe under the ancient Hebrew marriage perspective. If you understand, he is choosing or selecting a bride from amongst that which he has harvested. This is seen in a winnowing context and practice. The fall appointed times, however, is all based on the ingathering and the crushing harvests. So this is very different. Now, these happen to be based mainly around the crushing of the olives and the grapes. So you're seeing harvests speak. And of course, these harvests were always representing his people. And so as we come into this end of this race, this last day's race, as we come in to approaching the fulfillment of the actual fall appointed times, what is scheduled for the world to experience is the ingathering of the crushing harvests, which means that it's going to take a crushing now for repentance to occur. And so this becomes quite clear for us to understand if we have an ancient harvest picture, shadow picture, which is pointing to his people. And if we understand why this is laid out in his appointed times. So these aren't just religious feasts to tick obedience boxes. This is here to teach us how this all works in regarding the great plan of redemption, relating and pointing all to Messiah. So what does the prophet Daniel have to say? Well, we looked at him earlier at this, so we're just going to take a quick look at this. In Daniel 7:25, he mentions, and he shall speak words against the Most High. Now, this is referring to a coming false Messiah, but also to the adversary in the picture, full stop, within the beast system and the prostituted religious system. Now, this is interesting, against the Most High. So the attack is going to be against Messiah himself. And he shall wear out the saints of the Most High. He shall think to change, is often what you'll see in your English renderings of this, and the times. Think of this more in the Hebrew sense. It's more, he will seek to alter the times. He will seek to manipulate them. And the times is actually pointing to the reality here of the Moedim, the appointed times. So he's going to seek to alter the actual appointed times. And they shall be given into his hand for a times, and half a time. So this is interesting what he's going after here. He's actually going after the appointed times as a part of this and the actual saints. And there's a protection being given, apparently through all of this time, from the seals themselves. So he's seeking to do this, but it appears he's not going to be allowed to be fully successful in it until the end, when he is given to be able to take over and to conquer the saints. And this is mentioned in the book of Revelation, but it's quite interesting, the context of this, because it's referring to this last period of time, the Great Tribulation, which we will be getting into in the final part of the series. Goes on to say this as a part of what Daniel is saying, and we go into chapter 12, 3, 4. And we looked at this a little bit earlier, a part of the scripture, in looking at these prophecies from Daniel, where he talks about this, that those who are wise, so not those who are cognitively generated on AI, but those who are actually have the Ruach feeding into their life and that are actually being a part of this. So they're not going to the adversary. They're not going to the religious prostitute. They're not going to the adversary in the beast system. They are looking to the word. They are looking to the Ruach, and they are looking to his ways in order to have this wisdom. And it says, they will shine like the brightness of the sky above. And those who will turn many to righteousness. Righteousness is given by him. This is his standard laid out in the Torah. It's his righteousness, his ways, like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, and we said to shut up the words and seal this book, first person, until the time. Many shall run to and fro. So it's speaking about there's going to be great movement upon the face of the earth, and knowledge shall increase at this time as a result of this. Particularly the antecedent of this is the knowledge of his righteousness. And we're actually seeing this ability for many to go to and fro across the face of the earth. Well, this is going to be directly linked, or is the result of something that I believe is identified in this black horse. And then, of course, again, if the black horse is pointing us back to the appointed times, is very interesting. What Paul was saying here to Thessalonica, and to the Thessalonians, he writes this in 5:1-3. Now, concerning the times and the seasons, you, brethren, have no need that I have written to you. In other words, you're honoring the framework of of Messiah, the prophecies. You understand that this is all laid out as a part of what was given in the Torah to his people. So they've been practicing honoring this, knowing this their whole lives. And now they've witnessed the fulfillment of the spring appointed times. And so this whole understanding is, okay, we are actually seeing the fulfillment of the great plan of redemption. They're very aware of this now, not just from an observant sense, not just from an obedient sense. They have now started to understand the why. And so what it goes on to say is, for you yourselves are fully aware that the day of Yah will come like a thief in the night. This is direct reference to the high priest. So there's a high priest reference here to Messiah and how it would catch the watchman off guard. And I won't get into that, but it's very interesting, this allusion to the high priest and those who were supposed to be watching. And so for the high priest, and so he would sneak up on them and light the clothes on fires and things like that. Anyway, we don't have time for all this, but while people are saying there is peace and security, and we talked about this, that we have been in this incredible time post the Second World War, of this time of relative peace and security upon the earth, even though there's been wars and rumors of wars. And Messiah was saying, but the end is not yet. And so we're going to experience this sort of interesting type of dichotomy. And so then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains. So again, this is where we're getting the revelation birth pains. So it's referring, and what Paul's referring to is labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. So this is interesting. These appointed times, Sabbaths, all pointing to Messiah and the plan of redemption. And what Daniel was referencing is that they are not in darkness, those who have true wisdom. Well, of course, true wisdom begins with the fear of Elohim. And so these are our people that have become reverent. They have turned to their Elohim. They have accepted his plan of redemption, the blood that covers them, his ways. They are now entering back into the house of Israel. Apparently, they're going to shine like the stars above. So the light is shining into the darkness just like the stars. So you can see what was spoken about in Daniel is being connected right through by Paul here. It's an understanding within the disciple, all connected to the appointed times. And of course, this is going to go right into the book of Revelation. So what does this black horse and rider look like now? Okay. Well, for that, we just have to take a quick back to the past regarding the book of Revelation. And it's very interesting. So there was a great flood judgment. Okay. So oil does not take millions of years to form. And in fact, if, we can make oil today from just the vegetation we grow and things like that, it's just new oil. But it doesn't take millions of years to form. If there is sudden catastrophe, many scientists agree now the Earth's topography, doesn't matter whether they're creational based or whether they're evolutionary based, whatever it is, many of them agree that the evidence is showing catastrophism upon the face of the Earth. In geology, catastrophism is the theory based that the earth has largely been shaped by sudden, short-lived, violent events, possibly worldwide in scope. Well, of course, this is what we have come to know as the Great Flood Judgment scripturally in the word contained for us in the Torah. So if we look at this real quickly in Bereshit 11-13, it says, now the earth was corrupt in the sight, and the earth was filled with violence as a result of this. So what's interesting is this corruption was leading to violence. Brother slaying brother. The word there, the shachaf in Hebrew, to destroy, corrupted, to go to ruin, decay, to be marred, to be spoiled, injured, be ruined, rotten, spoiled, ruined, to pervert morally and physically, to destroy. Noah was found tamim, according to scripture, and this is recorded in Bereshit 6:9. This whole pure, clean in his generations. So he's being described spiritually and physically as tamim. Now, this is interesting. The corruptness here, is it possible that we're seeing something that has happened within human beings? Now, we know that DNA, to the transhumanism that we spoke about and whatnot, is corrupting the very creation itself. So once again, we appear to be in a similar place that the pre-Diluvian world got to. Now, what's important about this is that this forced the hand of Elohim to the point where he even lamented of the creation itself. to bring about a great judgment upon the face of the earth. Noah was spared. So Noah is spared with this. Why was Noah found? Why is he spared? Well, he's not engrossed with that which would make him unclean. So I'd suggest to you that some of the things we are seeing with the way that mankind is developing and playing with transhumanism in the form of actually playing with our DNA, the building blocks of life itself, to this mix of man and machine is getting really interesting. In a way, we have gotten back to just at the time pre-flood, pre-great judgment. Well, funnily enough, Messiah himself, when asked about all this, makes the point, just as they were in the days of Noah, so it will be coming at the Son of Man. So again, are we coming to the end of this race? Are we seeing the evidence that what we are now doing as a human race, as a fallen people, actually achieving something similar to what was just as in the days of Noah? Whereas in the days of Noah, the flood, they were eating, drinking, and marrying and giving in marriage up until the day that Noah entered the ark. It's very fascinating if you look at fallen man in the earth today. We're achieving all this violence on the earth. We're involving ourselves with AI, transhumanism, creating these war machines. We're seeing all of these things come across the face of the earth. Yet we seem to be going about our daily lives and people are eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, and so on. There seems to be an unawareness. You would think, again, that this would be some sort of oxymoron unless we were actually seeing and living it right now. The unawareness of how close we are getting to the end of the age and the coming of Messiah that is actually out there. And indeed, this description would seem to be at odds given this, but it actually isn't, and it's what we're actually witnessing right now upon the face of the earth while this is all going on. And they were unaware of the flood that came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. So there's an interesting description going on. They're doing things they shouldn't. There's a corruption going on actually within man, yet they are acting blissfully unaware. So again, there's this sense of, you would think it to be at odds with itself, but it's exactly what we're witnessing right now as we come to the end of the age. So again, no surprise. And so Messiah indeed described this interesting situation very accurately. Have we now become addicted to the remains of this great flood judgment? This is where it gets really interesting and linking to the black horse. I guess, given my past and coming from the oil industry and being an executive there, I became very aware of this early on in my career. And I became just intrinsically aware of being a part of this industry, which most people who haven't been a part of this industry do not know certain things and just what it means to the world. They might have a sense of it and whatnot, but when you live it, when you have to be engrossed with this in your daily life, you start to realize just the effect of what you're involved in. Well, the Father and my journey in my life had made me aware of this remnant of the great flood. These great catastrophes occurring simultaneously upon the earth at once, where the majority of the earth was landmass, and now it's going to become the majority is going to be the oceans. And so at a scale that is incomprehensible, the world was buried suddenly in great catastrophe, burying millions, trillions, quadrillions of tons of vegetation, matter, and animal and plant life quickly. This has left huge deposits all over the world, and certain areas have more than others because where the water settled, it would have pushed these all out, and these areas have settled, undercompacted, and we have now accessed this stuff in the way of oil. So we've taken our straws and we have dipped into essentially the remnant of the great flood judgment. And we have resurrected this stuff, and coincidentally enough, over the last 100 years, it has brought us back to the exact same place in the way of human behavior and violence. If you believe this to be a coincidence, I've got a bridge to sell you. This is stunning on historical levels. It should be impossible that I can even speak to you like this, that we have actually dipped into the remnant of the judgment, to get us right back to the same place. How the industry works is we go and we dip into this remnant in judgment. This is what's called the upstream. And we suck this stuff out, this black ink, and we're sucking it out, this past judgment, this remnant of a past judgment. We then refine that. So we try to purify this. We refine this, and the purification process of this middleman, this refining stage and transport stage, then eventually will take us to the storage of the refined product and the distribution of it. And I've got a service station here, a petrol station, a gas station showing how we can interact with this. It happens on many levels. But this is basically what you're seeing is upstream, refinement, downstream. This is the three basic components to understand how we get at the remnant of the judgment. How is this used? How is this judgment used? Well, oil and its offshoots, these petrochemical industry that goes into the distillates, the hydrocarbon gas liquefiers, to the motor gasolines that we use, all of these things, and then a very variety of other products, makes up all our traded goods, the growing and transporting of our global food supply. Coincidentally enough, just like the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat, we have now got something that's come into the equation that is literally sustaining life on Earth itself. This is very important for us to understand. The remnant of the judgment has been resurrected in order for us to actually now live. We are at this level of hydrocarbon addiction that is the serious predicament for which many in the beast system and many people that were without a faith are trying to grapple with. We have suddenly found ourselves into this modern day luxury goods and whatnot with this whole capacity that's being driven by this past remnant of this judgment. It affects every area of your life. We are meeting because we operate on this judgment. The screens that you're looking at, your phones, your clothes you wear, the food you go and get at the supermarket, to every gadget you can think of, your medical, your pharmaceuticals, your ability to visit one another, every component of life as you know it is now a part of the remnant of the judgment. I can't stress this enough, how serious this actually is, and why the black horse may be literally related to black, this black inky substance. Is this a coincidence? And again, we are at the first time since these words were written where we, as his people upon the face of the earth, are actually addicted to this. This could not have been said until now. So we have a lot of factors starting to come into play here. The time we've had since the fulfillment of the spring Moedim, our hydrocarbon addictions, our capability with war and weapons, the chances of me being able to take you through a series like this and use the word and it be this evident to you in the present, but also link it to the past and also look to the future, as long as we stay within the framework of his appointed times and the revelation of Messiah, which he's asked us to view it at, and the foundation is the Torah and the prophets. It is very interesting, the conversation that we can have when we look at where the race is at today. Okay, hydrocarbon addiction. I've got judgment blood here. Global daily crude consumption. Okay, of recent estimates, the world consumes approximately or almost, get this, 100 million barrels of crude oil each day. I don't know if you know what that would look like to see 100 million barrels stacked up, but that's going to happen today. And it will happen tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Do you get a sense of the staggering reality of this figure? It affects transport, industry, power generation, every form of residential use you can think of, all forms of life. 100 million. So what was beneath the ground from the Great Judgment has now come above the ground and has been brought up. This hydrocarbon addiction is not just serious, it's staggering in its implications to understanding, I believe, this component of the seals. It was allowed to be brought forth because Messiah opened it. Think no coincidence that it was back to his pre-judgment where we are exhibiting the exact same behaviors as we did before. Anyway, this is taken based on the OPEC's estimates. And there's various different views on this depending on who you look and where you go to. But generally speaking, we are sitting around oil reserves right now, proven oil reserves that we know of this remnant of the judgment, around 1.6 trillion barrels. Given on our current usage right now, this would basically put us in that we've got about 47 years left based on what we believe we have. So if it didn't change from here on in, we didn't find anything more, we would have 47 years left of getting ourselves to a state of violence addicted to the previous judgment. This is what the world is trying to grapple with. And as a result of this, the beast system is trying to deal with this as a part of all of this. And this is why we're seeing a lot of weirdness come out nowadays with so many things happening within world governments. And we will continue to look at that as we continue on in the series. Okay, production versus proven reserves. This is where it gets interesting. The United States right now has become the number one producer of the judgment. So it's bringing this out not only for its own use, but also to actually export. This is what you call energy independence. So there's not a dependence right now in North America on the rest of the world to supply its own needs. And indeed, it helps supply the rest of the world in this. Basically, these countries sit like this. And so what is interesting, though, on this is that the U.S. is quite a bit down at the bottom here, yet is the greatest producer of this. So it is using its proven reserves quicker than anyone else in this whole picture. So this is very interesting when you look at world geopolitics and hegemony and the full spectrum dominance of the war machines on Earth. We are addicted to this, and therefore our economy is addicted to this. And we'll speak about that in a second. And so we've got this playing out. So the production versus where the reserves are known. There was an interesting fella, M. King Hubert. He was the geoscientist, and he worked with fossil fuel giant Shell, Royal Dutch. And this was a part of, he was warning, we're going to get to a point where our proven reserves are going to hit peak. And what peak is that we are no longer finding enough to replace our usage. Okay, so think of it as that Rubicon's going to be crossed. And he put out many shocking things claiming that this would occur roughly around the beginning of the 21st century. Many of these things did not play out for various reasons in relationship to peak oil at the time. However, we have arrived now at the easily accessible oil reserves on these proven reserves on Earth, where we are now reaching what he was warning about, in the sense that we are going to struggle now to actually find and replace the proven reserves that we have. So the world is being pushed into, or the secular or the beast system is having to weigh this all up. And so this is going to affect policies, changes, agendas, and everything that we're seeing come forth across from the beast system at this time. In either case, all this being said and done, this is all based on what's called the ROEI ratio. Okay, and these are basically your return on energy invested ratios. I don't want to get into all of that. This is just part of my old world. But this is basically our ability to get this stuff, to get this judgment out of the ground in a cost-effective way. And that then affects the costs, affecting all the aspects of the economy, which then ultimately will affect the inflation and what we pay for things, and so on and so on. So, why are you going into all of this, Curtis? Well, this is now gone to what we call, and what many insiders are now calling, as peak extraction. So we've got this race going on. So the biggest countries with the biggest appetite for oil. So now we've got this drawing of it, and we've got these reserves of it, but we also got this use of it. Now, again, this is where the one of the predominant areas of the world where Ephraim and Manasseh came out from the British Isles as a part of the sons of Yaakov, and that I'd mentioned earlier in the series, is interesting. The United States has become the greatest consumer or user producing this on the face of the earth. Using this on the face of the earth. It's its highest in the consumption rates. So again, you can see how this war machine could be attached to this, because the need for it and the ability for a full spectrum dominance as it relates to a world economy, as it relates to the world stability, and so on and so on. Could this all be a coincidence? No. So peak oil extraction, well, options: find more oil reserves, reduce oil consumption, Alternative energy, electric cars, solar, nuclear, etc. Biomass fuel, this is your ethanols and whatnot, all of the above. And you're seeing now policies and decisions and people freaking out around the world because they know that if we're in peak extraction, that we are facing this journey now where we need to get off our hydrocarbon addiction. We're the drug addicts now to the to the remnant of the judgment, and we need this stuff. And it's fueling everything that was talked about coming to the end of the age. The good news is, I believe that, of course, we're not going to be allowed to run out of this. It was all a part of actually being and putting us into this place. And so, but if you're in the beast system and you're the United Nations or whatever else it is, they think we're just going to continue on and on like we are. So we got to do something about this because our drug addiction, our supplier, is going to struggle more and more moving forward to be able to get us the drugs we need. Just want to say this in the industry terms and whatnot, we often used to say to each other, the blood of the earth. It was like an oil industry quip. And we refer to this. And at the time, I didn't realize that, interestingly, this was actually the dead blood of the earth that we were resurrecting. So I've got this blood of the earth. What is interesting in Scripture is that it always refers to blood in terms of, and we see in Leviticus 17:3, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. So your life is in this blood and is given to you for the altar to make atonement for your soul and for the blood that makes atonement by the life. And so, of course, he's talking about the blood that is in all of us, our actual blood. And of course, more importantly, all pointing to the blood, the tree of life, his blood. And so life is in this. Now, what's interesting is that what we've become addicted to was judgment that brought death. So it's the exact opposite spectrum. We've become addicted to something that can only bring death because it's come from death. And so this is very interesting. Can it bring us death physically? Of course. Is it bringing us death spiritually, which is the weightier matter? Absolutely. We don't need the labor. We don't need Elohim to live our daily lives. And so being in that place, especially in the Western leg, has actually cost us our relationship with him. And so this has been allowed to go forth through the winnowing process. So many of us that are addicted, are part of this addiction, we're in it, we're not supposed to be of it. And so what's happening is we're having to overcome this and actually choose to repent and to seek him in his ways, despite the fact that we are living this. So what about the world's reserve currency? Well, again, it is attached to the Federal Reserve note. This is also known as the U.S. petrodollar. Okay, there's no such thing as a U.S. $1 bill anymore. This is actually a Federal Reserve note, and it's being used by the nation of the United States of America. This Federal Reserve note is no longer backed by gold. And so this was changed under the Nixon administration. In 1974, the U.S. government struck a series of deals with Saudi Arabia, creating what's known as the petrodollar system. Now, this is going to give you an understanding of what you've been seeing with wars and rumors of wars. Because of all of this, there's something been attached to the world reserve currency, which is the U.S. Federal Reserve note. This Federal Reserve note now became the replacement for the gold standard. This is very, very important, because this now then would become the dominant player affecting all of the world's economy would be traded in the U.S. Federal Reserve note. So if this changes, then the whole scape of the global interdependent economy, and indeed what could affect the sons of Jacob and all the Western leg and Western world, is now based and linked on this. If you think this is a coincidence, again, I've got another bridge to sell you. You mean these scales, this thing that could be related to inflation, is actually attached to this black inky stuff, and this all has a greater weight or spiritual signal, it appears, actually in the seal to his appointed times, particularly to his fall appointed times. How could this possibly be? The Federal Reserve note. So the dollar became the official middleman of global oil trade since. Simply until recently, virtually everyone who wanted to import oil from any country now needed to do this in the U.S. Federal Reserve notes. or dollars. The financial global markets make it much easier for foreign countries doing business with the U.S., dollars and oil and international trade and so on. This accounts and amounts to the trillions of dollars that are being traded in the services and products every year throughout this global interdependent economy. The U.S. Federal Reserve note, or the dollar, is used for approximately over 80% of all international trade and transactions upon the face of the earth. So we're not only addicted to this stuff, literally live with, we now require it in order to keep receiving the addiction. And this is all linked to the most powerful war machine on earth. Coincidence? Could war change all this? Well, I've got here this movement here. I'm just going to read this out of this U.S. and World Report article. This was in June 2025 this year, so very recent. And one of the more intriguing, it goes on to say, one of the more intriguing financial trends has gained popularity in recent years is the de-dollarization movement. De-dollarization is an effort by a growing number of countries to reduce the role of the U.S. currency or reserve currency, the dollar, in international trade. Countries like Russia, India, China, Brazil, Malaysia, among others, are seeking to trade channels using other currencies other than the almighty dollar. With President Donald Trump's international trades ramping up aggressively at this time, is the reserve status of the U.S. dollar going to be the next domino to fall? And of course, these are the questions being asked by world markets and things like that. And so they're looking at this sort of a thing. I think without war, I don't think this can change because of our level of addiction, just so everyone knows. Some would argue, well, you need war in order to keep it in this place. Well, again, we've been seeing this, especially since the post-Second World War order. But could a war come about that is so great, so impactful, that now war that keeps this reserve-based currency in play actually could be affected by the very war itself? And this is something that I believe that actually biblically is being indicated. There's going to come a point where what has kept this in play is no longer going to be able to. There are several factors that have led to the dollar maintaining international reserve currency status. One of them is so-called petrodollar. See, it's being mentioned here. So they know this. The world is linked to this trade of petrodollars instead of this gold standard. The mass majority of the world's oil transactions occur in this. And so it goes on to be making the point that and in fact, it's interesting, Elliot Johnson, the CEO of Bitcoin Treasury Corp, he said this: whether the dollar retains its dominance or not, the core principle investment stands. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. So people are looking at this going, wait a minute, all our eggs are in one basket. We're in trouble. So if anything goes out of control here at a great enough level that cannot be kept in control, then we could actually find what the scripture warns about, that your gold and your silver have become cankered. In other words, something has happened at such an extreme level to this global interdependent economy that it could bring about some of the things that are going to be a part of finishing these first four seals, and what we'll look at in the next part of the series with the pale horse. So war, the red horse and rider, could bring about this bondage or slavery through global inflation. Okay, so basically this red horse could bring this about, or could bring this into being. And so this is why I believe we're seeing in the order that it is. It appears that war at some level, to such a degree, is going to change the game. And it's going to bring about a bondage and or slavery through global inflation. We are seeing currently, and have, and especially since we've seen some examples happening just recently with the global pandemic response, to the COVID-19 virus, we saw some interesting things occur, but we saw how this could impact us greatly, and we've been seeing global food inflation ever since. What is interesting when you look at this, and this is showing right up to where we were experiencing the peak with the pandemic, what was interesting was food and beverages was paying the actual price when it came to inflation. So just a pandemic, we just talked about coming into play through the words of Messiah, and what we see in the fourth of these seals was the thing that was most affected upon the face of the earth was food. and the cost of food. Okay, and this is going to relate into this whole interdependent economy that is addicted to oil. And then again, we see here the inflation drivers, food and energy prices continue to drive global inflations. Again, you see the spike there in the IMF there. The International Monetary Fund is showing that, and Conofac was backing that up. So we saw this spike. So just a little bit of something going wrong on the face of the earth immediately spiked our food prices. This is the relationship that is so fragile in relation to our global interdependent economy because of our addiction to oil. And so if you start affecting whatever goes on with oil, we're going to start affecting now what happens with the cost of food. Now, remember what it was saying in the seal of Behold a Black Horse. A day's wage to feed a modern appetite of an adult, of a man. Very interesting. For a lower form of food, a day's wage would get you 3 meals, or 3 smaller portions, or less quality food. And this was represented in the barley. So exposure and crisis here. This goes on to say here, and this is, I've got here the chief economist, food and agriculture. So its annual state of food and security and nutrition in the world. And there was a report briefing on Tuesday. And so the journalists at the United Nations headquarters in New York released this. And it says the report to be released later this month reveals between 20 and 2024, the world experienced a dramatic increase in food prices, driven by the combination of COVID-19, inflation, and look this, the war in the Ukraine. So just our response to this pandemic and a war breaking out in the Ukraine that could affect oil areas of the world, and of course with Russia that involves Europe and the Nord Stream pipelines, the Nord Stream, and it's one of the largest producers of oil on the planet. Just this alone affected this, not to mention what actually Behold a Red Horse is speaking about scripturally. So it acts as little shadow pictures to show us just the sensitivity and just the fragile nature of this global interdependent economy. Anyway, these two things alone amplified inflation across the world and certainly aggravated food inflation. We're still paying the price to that to this day, although there's been some balancing out a little bit that's been going on recently. But again, it's an example. What does it take to make this happen? I just want to take a visit back to the Torah here in Exodus 5:1-2, and just remind everybody of something. So we're starting off here. Afterwards, Moses and Aaron went to said to Pharaoh. So they're coming to speak to him. And of course, Moses is up until this point complaining that he's not the one to deliver all of this. And of course, we're seeing Yah gets upset with him and, sort of says to go and basically go and do your job. Moses didn't see himself worthy, but Aaron came to help be a mouthpiece. And so they're approaching Pharaoh and they're saying things. But there's something that's quite missed here. If we go back to Exodus 5:1-2, and it says, "Thus saith Yah, the Elohim of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness." Now, this is interesting. We know where this is going to go because we're on the approach to something here. There's going to be some plagues that are going to have some real overtones of what we see concerning the Great Tribulation and the wrath of Elohim. And so this great shadow picture of the release of the people. And there's something this is anchored on that Elohim is wanting. He wants to have his feast. He wants to do and lay out the great plan of redemption. And he wants to do this through what he's going to lay out in honoring his appointed times. Now, it's very important. But Pharaoh said, "Who is Yah that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not, O Yah. Moreover, I will not let Israel go." Isn't that interesting how we're seeing on the world stage today? I don't know, you're Yah. I'm not letting your people out of bondage. I've got them all in bondage. The beast system is doing its thing. So think it's Pharaoh as a shadow picture of this final beast system. What is going on here? But Moses and Aaron have come to him to make a request before, of course, what would be this great judgment upon, literally Egypt, and how it would finally play out. What's his response? Make bricks and get your own straw. So it even got worse. But the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you take the people away from their work? They're in bondage. They're in slavery. Get back to your burdens. Notice what it was saying, and behold, the black horse, the burdens, the bondage, the scales. And Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land are now many, and you make them rest from their burdens? The same day Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people and their foremen, you shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks, which of course was a filler and made this much easier as a process. Okay, and so they needed the straw as a part of this. As in the past, let them go and gather the straw now for themselves. So now he's increased the workload to make or fulfill the quota productions of the brick, which he had been putting in place with the people of Israel. But what is missed with all of this is the link to this. His response to this is directly related to the denial of what we would come to know as the spring appointed times. There's actual feasts happening that Yah wanted. And he wants to teach his people this. So this is very interesting. The response to this was actually against the appointed time request of Yah himself. Not a great idea to do that. So global supplies versus biblical wars. Notice this portion of the world where the majority of this black stuff is coming from. The ancient lands of Magog, and it's all coming out. And then, of course, all the lands that are surrounding, that are involving Psalm 83, the Magog invasions, the actual stuff coming out of the ground is all centrally based on the earth today, or, of course, what we know of as the Middle East or the ancient biblical lands. Do you believe this to be a coincidence? Again, it should be impossible what we're doing here, as it relates to the word and how much it relates both physically upon the earth as well as spiritually, as well as pointing to his appointed times. The major points of the world that will come into play, we talked about this in the war series there in the Strait of Malacca, the island chains, and what China is up to right now is one of the major points going down now across the world. Of course, I've been raising the Strait of Hormuz and what is going on there with Iran. Again, we're seeing this in play. And of course, Russia or Magog or the ancient lands coming down there through the Nord Stream and into the straits there, and then the Suez Canal itself. Now, this is fascinating when we're to take these 4 points. If these get disrupted in points of war, and if this happens simultaneously, that we are trying to deal with this with the current global interdependent economy, which is completely hydrocarbon addicted to the dead blood or the remnant of the judgment, which is sustaining life on earth as we know it. If we end up with red horse stuff happening, with this stuff, you can see how a black horse is going to come forth. Approximately 50% of the world's daily oil supplies, and therefore global trade, will be gone. You saw just what happened with food prices, just with a response to a global pandemic and a war in the Ukraine. I can't even begin to stress this enough. I lived this my whole life. I understand hydrocarbon addiction. I know that we do not have life without it. Most people don't. They really don't understand how this works. They don't understand how every day they live, because of something that may be identified in the third seal, is actually in play. And your ability to sustain life is based on it. And if we get some red horse stuff happening with this, you can see how the black horse will go forth with the bondage and the burden of inflation. And interestingly enough, how this is being linked to the fall appointed times, the oil and the wine. And in fact, it says not to harm the ability to do this. This is very interesting. Come out of her, my people. Is this actually indicating that those that have turned in repentance to Yah and his ways may actually experience a form of protection during this time? It's possible. And it might be possible that it's directly pointed to his appointed times. Do you mean obedience and honoring his righteous ways could actually have us fall under this seal where do not harm these appointed times? It's very interesting. It's only right at the end that it's handed over, that he's given to conquer the saints. Is it possible we could be seeing huge disruption becoming on the face of the earth, and yet there's actually principles in play biblically that could help protect us, or at least take us through these things in a way that we understand what's happening, that our shalom is there? Could it actually go to the actual level of actual protection? Well, there was Goshen that we see in the example of Egypt and Pharaoh. There was a place where they were protected while these plagues went down. There is a biblical precedent and principle at play here. And it's possible this is hidden within the third seal. The shutdown of the North American upstream. I've given you the example of what sits here in Canada, and there's the US's. Just want to make this very clear. So one is the Athabascan oil sands in Canada, and the other is the Permian Basin in Texas. These are just two of the largest examples in North America of what is happening. Now, again, if these were impacted for any reason and unable to produce, there would be an immediate effect on supply and the cost. And it would be hitting our shelves very quickly. And in fact, we saw what just a virus outbreak could do to food shelves just in a matter of days. So we want to be on the right side of these seals. We want to be and to understand where we're at. The world is grappling with this. We're going to finish up here. I've got Milton Friedman here. He makes a statement. The government's solution to a problem is usually as bad as the problem. Boy, I couldn't agree more. And so what are we going to do? We've got this peak extraction going on. We've got this global climate change happening. We've got this world interdependent economy. We got these wars and everything else. And so, of course, the beast system is trying to grapple with itself. So this is a lot of what you see coming out with the efforts of the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the WEF, all of these things trying to affect world governments, because essentially man is freaking out. It does not have wisdom, and it will try and deal with the problems that it can see as well, having no idea how this relates actually to biblical prophecy and actually how it links to the whole great plan of redemption. They do not have this wisdom nor hope. So, of course, you come up with things like this. I got you in Agenda 21 by 2030. This is serious. They are trying to put into place many things which you are going to see are going to be weird. And you look at your governments around the world, especially in the Western leg, they're going to be looking at, what are you guys doing to us? You're taking away our freedom. You're doing these sorts of things. And they're trying to respond to something the best they know how, but the way they will respond to it is slavery and bondage. Make bricks and get your own straw. In other words, their solutions are going to be very similar in analogy to potentially Pharaoh. We're not going to let you go. You're going to have to do this, this, and this, and this, and this because of our sustainable development and agendas. And they are looking at things and real problems, which without Elohim, they're going to try and come up with solutions. Those solutions might play into the hand for the need for a false Messiah to come into play because we get ourselves in such trouble. And therefore falling upon the deception that is warned about and is given to us prophetically. But these are very real. So I'm just giving you a sense of what they're really facing. So not everybody in the United Nations or UN or WF has to be evil people serving the devil. They just simply have got to know a number of factors and how precarious this and fragile this global interdependent reality is sitting on. And then have that mass fear, mass ignorance, at least as it relates scripturally, and then bring in mass greed and bring those three things, and you're going to create very bad fruit. I believe the adversary knows this. And so we're all seeing this stuff come out and we're going, what are you doing to us? In Romans 1:24-25, something interesting here is mentioned upon it. It says, therefore Elohim gave them up to the desires of their heart, to impurity, and the dishonoring the body of their bodies amongst themselves, because they exchanged the truth of Elohim for a lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. As we finish up here today, I want to really put this in perspective on what this green agenda is, the make more bricks without straw. It is based on creation worship. In other words, we got to save the planet, this whole green agenda that you're seeing. Now, on the face of it, well, of course, we want to look at this and go, well, why would we want to hurt the planet, right? And so there's a place that we want to be. But we have to take a step back and go, what are we willing and what lengths will we go to in the form of make more bricks with straw, bondage and slavery, in order to try and survive? To what level could the earth go to? And of course, this is most certainly moral in its referencing, but I'm also going to suggest to you it could relate to the corruption of DNA and AI integration levels, dishonoring their body amongst themselves, just as in the days of Noah. This level of blindness leads to his wrath. And in Romans here, you're going to see what preceding this. This brings about a wrath in Elohim. He doesn't like it. And it's actually going to impact the fall appointed times. There's something going on. And this, of course, would be brought down on the head of Pharaoh, relating to the spring appointed times in that example. And of course, we know the result of the plagues and the final death of the firstborn would lead to them being led out. And of course, what we've come to know of as the great Exodus and the beginning of the Passover. There's going to be an example of this that's going to occur for the fall appointed times with the oil and the wine. So we've got this cyclic, these shadow pictures, nothing new under the sun. We are seeing the release of bondage to something. And in the meantime, we've got to deal with all of this tree hugging. Now, again, make this point, conservationism versus environmentalism. There is nothing wrong with being good stewards and wanting to be good stewards of the creation that we have been given. And in fact, we are instructed to be. So we are to behave in a way that shouldn't have got us in this mess, but it is the way fallen man has behaved that has got us in this mess. And so now it's trying to deal with this mess again without his wisdom. So environmentalism is an ancient practice of evil. You're just not used to it. And we're going to talk a bit more about this in the next coming series of how this is actually playing out. We just see it as climate change agendas and all this sort of things. But there's a much more evil thing underlying all of this. But we want to, save our desire and object of worship, the earth. This is environmentalism. Conservation says I'm going to be a good steward of the earth and worship the creator, not the creation. This is the reverse model trying to find solutions for the problem that we're in. This involves in carbon taxes. You don't get your plastic straws. You get those goofy paper things. Plastic straw, single-use plastics it is, even now, can we even have cooking for gas? Eat your bugs. Food production is costing too much. Electric vehicle mandates, kill the babies in the womb. All of this because of what we've become addicted to, which is the actual remnant of the great flood judgment, is dead blood, and it is leading to a cult of death as a solution to deal with this addiction. This sign that says just stop oil are people who do not understand the scale nor the relevance of it in just a secular sense, never mind a biblical sense. So they go marching around with all these signs with their environmentalism, their need to worship and preserve the earth, and their simple solution is just stop oil. They might as well say, just kill me now, please. That's what should be on that sign. But they have no comprehension of what they are saying. And it's literally what they're saying. And because of that, it'll be, it won't say, just kill me now, please. It'll say, just kill them, please. Because, of course, no one wants to be the one to go. And so we've got this very interesting predicament that's going to start leading us in to this final thing that's going to cross the line in all of this play. So behold a pale horse, Revelation, birth pains. So we've got this very interesting progression starting to happen, and it's all bringing us to something very interesting. We're going to finish here. All of this is we're about to be set free. And like the example I was giving you, do you know that even though they were being told, make your brick quotas, you go get your own straw to do it, you're going to work harder to fulfill the orders of Pharaoh, representing the beast system at that time. But what was actually about to happen directly relate to the spring appointed times was they were going to be set free. We are on the verge of something here. And this is where this finished. And let us not forget this as we continue to go through this series in Revelation, what this is really all about. We're about to be set free. You've been in bondage your whole life. You've been making bricks your whole life. And now, right at the end here, we got to even get our own straw. And it seems like you work all day and labor and slave to try and get ahead, to try and afford life. All of these sorts of things. We're about to be set free. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, and he and all his servants and the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, a great cry, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. This indeed had played out in a very interesting way. And it took this level for the beast system to get it. Then he summoned Moses and Aaron by night. So Pharaoh summons them and says, "Up, go out from among my people, both you and the people of Israel." Notice how he refers to them, the people of Israel. We don't even have a promised land yet. And go and serve Yah, the one he wouldn't recognize and the voice he wouldn't recognize. As you have said, take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone. And bless me also. Interestingly enough, he's defeated. At this point, the Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them out of the land in haste, for they said, "We shall all be dead if we don't." I want to encourage you with this. Make more bricks, no more. And certainly make no more bricks, no more. And get your own straw. Please understand as we go through this series, and remember this. We have the shadow pictures. We understand how Elohim works. And when we get to the height of this bondage, this slavery that we are seeing and how it's playing out in food inflation, and what we are seeing with Behold a Black Horse is actually telling you King is coming. And we are about to be set free from this bondage. It's getting enough upon this planet. And people are getting scared and they're freaking out. And for us, we don't need to freak out, and we can have the shalom. And who knows, maybe even honoring the thing that he says not to harm could form some of the protection, very protection itself, as we head through and start going through into these very turbulent waters. But know this, he is not allowing it all for no reason. It is all with hope. It is all for a reason, and it's so that we may be set free. Amen? Let's finish there for today. And we'll come back for Behold a Black Horse Q&A, and we can go over a few questions in relationship to that as we march on towards the completion of this series. Be back soon.